Hey there, BookTube. Noah. Everyone who reads it must converse is the channel. Thanks for coming by again. So today I wanted to touch on the Buddhist series, but in the form of a text. This is the Tibetan Book of the Dead. What an awesome edition this is. This is the Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition. It's got this kind of shiny blue to it. Well, I've been all through this book over and over. Very beautiful. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is awesome. It's completely awesome. But I'm gonna touch on it, and I'll kind of go over what the Tibetan Book of the Dead is about and what it is for sure. But I want to touch on it in the frame of like what Buddhist ideas, how they actually play out in practice. So when it comes down to it, Tibetan Buddhism, where the culture that this text comes out of, Tibetan Buddhism is Vajrayana. So that is the third iteration of Buddhism in Tibet. And when it comes down to it, this is a very systematic and formal kind of practice. Vajrayana practice. So we'll touch on a little bit of that kind of stuff, but I wanted to look at the text in light of just the Buddhist ideas that come out of this. So the first thing that we are going to have to touch on to understand the Tibetan Book of the Dead is that the universe, the reality that we're in, is of mental construction. It is collective mental construction. We all have a part in it. We all have pretty much an equal part. That is to say that everybody has the same potential for creation. But those that cultivate that kind of energy and know what they're doing and cultivate the activity of creation, they have more power in that way, right? So who cultivates more energy? Well, spiritual beings cultivate more energy. So the ones that are practicing a certain, any spiritual, any spiritual practice, real spiritual practice, which when broken down is almost any humanitarian act. Any act that looks at the other and is going out towards the other over and above the self is of a spiritual nature. So the Tibetan Book of the Dead, this is actually like a manual, okay? This is a manual of practice of Vajrayana, and it is a manual of how to die and go through the state in between lifetimes, because as you remember, we are in a cyclic cosmology with Buddhism. There is no, afterlife in which, you kind of go and be there forever. There is rebirth after rebirth after rebirth, and you're going to be in all different forms of beings based on your state. So this is a manual for that in-between state, between a death and a new birth. That's called the Bardo. So the Tibetans have a saying, and it's very prescient. It's very awesome. If you want to know what kind of being you were before, in the lifetime before, just take a look at your body now, the kind of body you have. And if you have a human body, then you are very fortunate. You have gained that. A human being is a very fortunate individual. So if you want to know what kind of lifetimes you led before, just take a look at your body now. And if you want to know what kind of lifetime that you're going towards, then you take a look at your mind now. If you're a being, a type of being that it is hard to think about virtue and to go towards virtue, then that is a sure sign that you need to meditate, make space for that kind of thing, and also read spiritual texts and just kind of get an understanding of that kind of thing. If your mind is towards, it is going towards virtue, and it's very easy for you to fall into an optimistic, idealistic kind of spiritual idealism, then you're well on the way. What it comes down to is there's no real right or wrong thing to do. There's only skillful and unskillful. And it's only skillful and unskillful in reference to yourself. That is it. So, we already touched on the idea that the universe is of mental construction. It is a collective mental construction. And I just want to touch on a few things in the text, and it will give us a little bit of context. And, I can pretty much open to any page in this book right here, and it is interesting. It is amazingly interesting. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is amazing. So, this is is expounding on the time of death. Okay, what happens at the time of death? At this moment, the inner radiance of the ground of being dawns upon all sentient beings. And in the case of a few yogis who have achieved realization, at this moment, the inner radiance of the path meets the inner radiance of the ground. Like a meeting of mother and child, so an individual's path meets the ground of reality itself. And the ground of reality itself is a radiance. And so the yogi there that achieves is following spiritual path, and that path is actually akin to the ground of being itself. It's like the meeting of a mother and child, and thus now instantaneously in an ascending and core penetrating manner, these yogis will actualize the uncredited Buddha body of reality. And through the bodies of perfect resource and emanation, they will perform inestimable actions for the sake of all beings. Thus, the three bodies will be spontaneously present, past, present, and future, and Buddhahood will be attained. Now, when that is showing that what happens when, like, a yogi, somebody who is a practitioner that has a level of realization, a deep level of realization, when they die. Because what happens when you die in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, what is said is what happens when you die is the blinding light of spiritual reality dawns on the mind of the person. And when that happens, the normal person, what you're going to do is you're going to, turn away in awe and in fear of this thing. It is unbelievable. So then you kind of go down levels of reality, levels of beingness, levels of being, until you find a level on which you feel comfortable. And that level on which you feel comfortable is all about your mind state. Look at it like Neo in the Matrix, right? When Neo is first plugged into the Matrix with Morpheus, not into the Matrix, when he's plugged in to a program, a simulation with Morpheus after he's woken up, and Morpheus says, oh, do you think that's your body that you have right there? No, this is a digital representation of your mental self. You're projecting this, is what he's saying. And so that is how the Tibetan Book of the Dead, that's a very good kind of analog for how the Tibetan Book of the Dead describes your body and your being after you die. You are just consciousness, just your own consciousness. Now, do you have a body? Not physically, but you might think you have a body. You're still the consciousness is where it feels comfortable. That's where the consciousness sits. So it's very interesting. And so I thought to touch on that for sure. So there is a lot of different practices laid out in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. A lot of them are kind of holographic in nature. And I wanted to point this out because when it comes down to it, there's not an understanding, I don't think, I definitely didn't understand it at first, a lot of this kind of thing. The universe being of mental construction, the universe being outside and inside, both of that, and being like a, so I just pulled this one out because this will help. This is a rite of averting death. This is a state where death might be coming because of some obstruction, some illness that actually could be overcome, but has a foothold, and you do this kind of thing at that time. Immediately following the initial experience of such signs of death approaching, one should perform the appropriate rites for averting death, which include ceremonies, services, and exorcisms. In this regard, one should know that of the 12 months of the year, 2 are ruled by each of the 5 elements, while the 2 remaining months are ruled by all 5 elements in common. Also, within each of these months of the year, there is a 5-day period ruled by each of the 5 elements, while the 5 remaining days are ruled by 5 elements in common. The signs of death cannot be averted, however, when an imbalanced elemental or malevolent force completely controls the body. Just as, for example, if fire breaks out in a tall fortress, it is more easily averted while it is first confined within the lower story. But should it reach the top of the fortress, the fire cannot be extinguished. So, there we have an illustration of when you might be able to stop death from approaching, or when it's too far progressed. But what I read that for to point out is the kind of holographic nature of how they're looking at the times of the year being ruled by the elements. Each month, 2 months, 2 months, 2 months is ruled by an element, and then the final 2 months is ruled by all the elements together. But then within each month, there's each element, and then days where all 5 elements rule. So it just keeps breaking down, and they would have it within each week. They would have it within each day. Then each day, if you look at each day, well, it would be within each hour. It's not, these kind of systems are not for saying it's like this and it's not any other way. They are for expanding the consciousness of the practitioner to understand that these are the kinds of powers that you have to work with. And so here I wanted to touch on a little. Okay, so once the body is fully in the Bardo, the Bardo is the in-between state between lives. Once the being is fully within the Bardo, that being is going to be wandering this way and that, going to see all manner of terrors and horrors and beauty and all the things that dreams are made of, and all the things that the mind is made of. That's what's in the Bardo. Collective mental construction. That's what's in the in-between state. And so this has a huge section called The Great Liberation by Hearing. The Great Liberation by Hearing. And that is a portion of the Tibetan Book of the Dead that would actually be read by monks over a dead person, over a dead individual. And they would be speaking to the spiritual body of that individual. And the kind of things they would say is this: "Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated aversion, may the transcendent Vajrasattva draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant light, which is the mirror-like pristine cognition. May the Supreme Consort support me from behind, and thus, encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state, and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. By making this aspirational prayer with fervent devotion, you will dissolve into a rainbow of light in the heart of the transcendent Vajrasattva, and you will attain Buddhahood as the Buddha body of perfect resource in the Eastern Buddha field of the manifest joy." So, very, very esoteric, because the Vajrasattva, that Buddha is the primal Buddha. That Buddha is not a historical figure. That is just the primal, most raw enlightenment energy. And so that is the being that is called out at that time. But this is to be read over practitioners, right? So when it comes down to it, that there is a lot of kind of setup as far as practice, spiritual practice in a practitioner's life, so that this would be what was said to him. But what it's saying is amazing. So I hope that you enjoy this, and I'm going to kind of read a bit more here, because this is a very a great part of the liberation by hearing that I came into, and I think that it'll give us some food for thought. And this is the kind of thing that they're going for. Liberation can be attained in the intermediate state as a result of the above introduction. However, even though this introduction is given due to negative past actions, recognition may not occur. So again, you should call the deceased by name and say the following words: "O child of Buddha nature," call the deceased by name, "listen to me. It is due to your own past actions that you are now suffering in this way. No one else is responsible. This is solely the result of your own past actions. Pray ardently now to the three precious jewels. That is the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Sangha is the body of practitioners. They will protect you. If you do not pray intensely now, especially if you do not know how to meditate on the Great Seal, or if you cannot meditate on a meditational deity, the innate good conscience within you will now gather together all your virtuous actions, counting them out with white pebbles, and the innate bad conscience within you will gather all your non-virtuous actions, counting them out with black pebbles. At this moment you will tremble with extreme fear, awe, and terror. You will tell lies, saying, I have not committed non-virtuous actions. But at this it will be said, I will consult the mirror of past actions. And in the mirror of past actions, all your virtues and non-virtues will be reflected vividly and precisely. Your attempts at deceit will be of no use. Tying a rope around your neck, you will be dragged forward. Your head will be severed at the neck. Extract your heart. Pull, despite all this, you will not die. Even as your body is repeatedly cut to pieces, it will be continuously revived. Experiencing being cut into pieces in this way, time after time, will cause enormous suffering. From the moment of the counting the pebbles begins, do not be afraid. Do not be terrified, and do not lie. And do not be afraid of the demons. The body which you now have is a mental body. Therefore, even though you experience being slain and cut to pieces, you cannot die. Recognize now that in reality you need have no fear, because in truth your body is a natural form of emptiness. They are also, the demons, in reality, natural forms of emptiness. These are your own bewildered perceptions. Your body, formed of mental propensities, is a natural form of emptiness. Emptiness cannot harm emptiness. Signlessness cannot harm signlessness. Outside and distinct from your own bewildering perceptions, gods, demons, malevolent forces, the bull-headed demons, and so on, do not substantially exist. Recognize this. Recognize now that this is the intermediate state. Place your mind in the meditative stability of the Great Seal. If you do not know how to meditate, directly examine the essence of that which is producing your fear and terror. This essence is a stark emptiness, completely without inherent existence in any respect whatsoever. This stark emptiness is the Buddha body of reality. Yet this emptiness is not a nihilistic, vacuous emptiness. The essential nature of this emptiness is an awesome, direct, and radiant awareness, which is the enlightened intention of the Buddha body of perfect resource. Indeed, emptiness and radiance are not separate. The essential nature of emptiness is radiance, and the essential nature of radiance is emptiness. This indivisible, naked, unclouded, and exposed awareness, present as it is right now in a natural, uncontrived state, is the Buddha body of essentiality. Furthermore, the natural expressive power of this Buddha body of essentiality is the compassionate Buddha body of emanation, which arises everywhere without obstruction. O child, please hear me now. Do not be distracted. By merely recognizing the essential nature of your experience in the above way, you will attain perfect Buddhahood, endowed with the 4 Buddha bodies. Do not be distracted. The division between Buddhas and sentient beings is determined by this recognition only. If you are distracted at this critical moment, the opportunity to escape from the swamp of suffering will be lost. In an instant, penetrating analysis is made. In an instant, the perfection is attained. So, it's all about the state of mind, guys. It's all about the state that the being is in. And we follow somebody through that, through all different ways. And there's all these invocations like that. And then we follow and see how a being is reborn. Reborn as a human in here. It is told how other rebirths happen, but we actually follow somebody very, very closely being reborn in the human state. So I hope you enjoyed this, and this was fun. And I'll catch you on the next one, BookTube. Tibetan Book of the Dead. Definitely check it out. Bye-bye.